Every one of us is capable of extraordinary discipline, not because of genetics or motivation or luck, but because of how the human brain is wired. And the good news is discipline isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. Today, I'm going to share one simple habit. It only takes 60 seconds that can literally rewire your brain to become more focused, more resilient, and radically more self-controlled. This isn't motivational fluff. It's based on real neuroscience when you understand how your brain responds to specific behaviors. Especially this one, you stop relying on willpower and start creating neurobiological momentum. So if you've ever struggled with staying consistent, if you've ever asked yourself, why can't I follow through? Stay with me, because this 1-minute shift could be the first step toward a life of iron discipline. And it starts now. Discipline is often misunderstood as a personality trait, something you either have or you don't. But neuroscience has revealed something far more empowering. Discipline is not fixed. It's not coded permanently into your DNA. It's a trainable function rooted in specific neural circuits within your brain. This means that anyone, regardless of background or current habits, can build and strengthen discipline through consistent behavioral engagement. The foundation of this lies primarily in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and planning. The prefrontal cortex doesn't operate in isolation. It works alongside deeper brain structures, such as the basal ganglia, which handle routines and habits, and the limbic system, which processes emotions and desires. When you understand this system, you understand that discipline is not about denying yourself momentary pleasure, but about guiding your behavior through well-formed neural pathways that prioritize long-term outcomes over short-term gratification. Training discipline begins with awareness and activation of these key brain regions. Small, repeated actions send signals to these neural circuits, telling them this is important, this matters, strengthen this pathway. Over time, those circuits respond by reinforcing the behavior, making it easier and more automatic. This is where the idea of neuroplasticity comes in. Neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to adapt, rewire, and grow in response to repeated effort and stimulus. So every time you make a disciplined choice, you're not just succeeding in the moment, you're literally reshaping your brain to make it easier to stay disciplined in the future. Let's consider a 60-second daily habit like intentional breath work or a moment of stillness and focus immediately upon waking. That single minute may seem small, but what it does is engage the prefrontal cortex right at the start of your day. Instead of immediately reaching for your phone or getting swept into emotional reactivity, you anchor yourself in a deliberate act. That act tells your brain you are in control. It sets a tone neurologically for the rest of your decisions that day. And when repeated daily, it becomes a signal that the executive center of your brain, not your reflexive, distracted systems, is in charge. This shift is subtle but powerful. You're building a top-down control system where the higher order functions in your brain begin to dominate your decision-making process. Discipline is also heavily influenced by the neuromodulator dopamine, which governs motivation and reward. Many people associate dopamine with pleasure, but its true function is far more nuanced. Dopamine is about anticipation, about craving the process, not just the result. When you develop a habit that links effort to dopamine release, you begin to crave the process of staying disciplined. That's a critical flip. Most people wait to feel motivated before acting, but the neurobiological truth is that action generates motivation through dopamine release. So the more you act with discipline, the more your brain begins to associate effort with pleasure and reward. It's also important to note that the brain doesn't distinguish between big and small actions when it comes to habit formation. What matters most is consistency and repetition. A 60-second habit done every single day has a far greater impact than a massive lifestyle change done inconsistently. This is because repetition is what creates strength in neural pathways. Just like muscles grow from repeated contractions, your discipline circuitry strengthens with daily signals. The reason why the habit must be intentional and time-bound is that it creates structure and reliability. The brain thrives on predictable cues. If you do the same action at the same time for the same purpose every day, the brain locks into it more efficiently and prioritizes it neurologically. Finally, building discipline neurologically is not about being perfect every day. It's about recovering fast. When you miss a day, the goal is to return to the habit as soon as possible. This rapid return is itself a form of discipline training. It tells the brain that your identity is tied to resilience and consistency, not perfection. Each return to the habit reinforces a powerful narrative. I am someone who acts with intention. Over time, this narrative becomes encoded into your neural architecture and begins to influence your choices automatically. You stop needing to fight yourself so much. The conflict between the impulsive and the intentional starts to fade, and your disciplined self becomes your default mode. This is not magic. It is science. It is repetition. It is structure. And it begins with just 60 seconds. The brain's ability to regulate behavior, especially in moments of distraction or temptation, largely depends on the prefrontal cortex. This area of the brain plays a crucial role in self-control, decision-making, and the suppression of impulsive actions. When we talk about developing discipline, we are really talking about increasing the activity and strength of this brain region. A simple 60-second habit, when performed consistently, can act as a daily trigger to activate the prefrontal cortex. This activation builds mental pathways that make self-regulation more automatic over time. In moments of emotional reactivity, stress, or fatigue, individuals who regularly engage this brain region are better equipped to pause, reflect, and choose a response rather than falling into habitual or emotional reactions. The beauty of a short, structured habit lies in its ability to engage this executive control center right when it matters most. For example, taking 60 seconds in the morning to sit still, breathe deeply, and mentally rehearse your intentions for the day serves as more than just a calming practice. It is neurologically lighting up the prefrontal cortex and preparing it to lead your behavior throughout the day. Studies in cognitive neuroscience have shown that even short moments of mindfulness or controlled breathing enhance activity in this region, leading to greater focus, emotional regulation, and long-term goal alignment. This small act becomes a form of mental training similar to lifting weights, but for your ability to stay on task and resist immediate gratification. Additionally, activating the prefrontal cortex influences downstream brain structures that govern emotion and habit. It has inhibitory control over the amygdala, which is the emotional center of the brain. When the prefrontal cortex is active and strong, emotional outbursts, anxiety responses, and cravings are significantly reduced in intensity and frequency. The brain is literally being trained to filter what matters and what does not. The noise of internal distractions and external triggers is lowered, allowing for clearer, calmer decision-making. That's why just 1 minute of intentional activation each morning can carry over into everything you do, because it's shaping how your brain filters and processes reality for the rest of the day. On a behavioral level, this habit becomes a form of priming. By deliberately initiating the day with a calm, disciplined act, the brain is cued to follow that trajectory. It's as if you've set a tone that guides future behaviors into alignment with that first act of control. The brain begins to look for patterns that match your initial state. This is related to the concept of behavioral momentum, where a small, consistent action increases the likelihood of larger, more disciplined behaviors following naturally. The first action of the day becomes a kind of anchor, pulling the rest of your decisions into its orbit. Over time, the repetition of this practice creates structural changes in the brain. Neuroimaging studies have demonstrated that people who engage regularly in focused mental practices, whether meditation, breath work, or visualization, show increased gray matter density in the prefrontal cortex. This means the brain is physically reshaping itself to support long-term thinking, impulse control, and planning. You are not just training your mind, you are transforming your brain's architecture in ways that make disciplined behavior more effortless over time. This is a profound realization because it shows that discipline isn't about trying harder. It's about building the kind of brain that doesn't need to try so hard. The consistency of this 60-second habit also trains the brain in reliability and predictability. When the same neural circuits are activated at the same time daily, they strengthen rapidly. This is how habit loops form. But unlike random or impulsive habits, this one is deliberately designed to build higher order control. It's a neural shortcut to self-mastery. And the more often it's practiced, the more it reduces cognitive load in moments of decision. When faced with a difficult choice, you're more likely to default to the higher path because your brain has been conditioned to prioritize discipline as the default behavior. This practice also acts as a cue for other healthy behaviors. Once the prefrontal cortex is activated, people are more likely to follow through on exercise, nutrition, deep work, and other disciplined activities. It's a chain reaction of executive functioning. The first step leads to the next, and the next because the brain begins to enjoy the state of clarity and control. The body responds as well. Stress hormones decrease, heart rate variability improves, and the overall sense of agency increases. This physical feedback reinforces the habit further, creating a powerful positive feedback loop. Ultimately, the habit doesn't need to be complex. It just needs to be consistent, intentional, and neurologically sound. A single minute of activation primes the brain, engages the executive network, suppresses reactive impulses, and creates a ripple effect that can carry through the rest of your day. And the longer you practice, the more you become the type of person who acts with discipline, not through force or effort, but because it's been wired into how you think, feel, and behave. Consistency in a simple daily habit may seem small on the surface, but its impact on your brain's internal chemistry is profound. Repeating a 60-second action each day, especially one tied to intention and focus, gradually reshapes the brain's dopamine and motivation pathways. Dopamine is often misunderstood as merely the molecule of pleasure, but in truth, it plays a more important role in anticipation, drive, and reinforcement learning. The dopamine system doesn't just reward outcomes, it teaches the brain which actions are worth repeating. When a behavior is associated with even a slight increase in dopamine, the brain tags it as valuable, increasing the likelihood of repeating it. Over time, consistently applying this habit teaches your brain that discipline itself is rewarding, making you naturally gravitate toward more structured, intentional behaviors. Every time you perform that 60-second habit, even if it's something as simple as a deep breathing practice or a mindful pause, your brain is engaging a powerful feedback loop. You are sending a signal to your nervous system that you're taking control, that you are acting with direction rather than reacting to chaos. The dopamine released in those moments may be subtle, but over time, it compounds. More importantly, the pattern of repeated effort, followed by even a small internal reward, builds a strong neural association between effort and satisfaction. That's critical because most people wait for motivation to come before acting. But neuroscience tells us the opposite. It is action that triggers motivation. Dopamine release is tied more closely to the pursuit of goals than to their achievement. When you build a habit that includes consistent, effortful behavior, no matter how brief, you're engaging the very machinery that sustains long-term motivation. This process also influences the basal ganglia, the part of your brain involved in forming habits and automated behaviors. When you practice the same intentional behavior every day, especially if done at the same time or in the same setting, the basal ganglia begins to encode the behavior as part of your routine. Over time, this creates a neural shortcut, allowing the behavior to occur with less resistance and more fluency. In practical terms, it means that after a few weeks or months of practicing this habit, it feels less like a struggle and more like a natural part of who you are. The brain learns that discipline is not an energy-consuming activity, but a familiar pattern. That shift in perception is essential for long-term consistency. Another vital component of this process is the role of effort-based learning. Neuroscience shows that when we push ourselves to do something effortful, particularly when it aligns with a larger goal, there is a stronger reinforcement of that action. The brain doesn't just remember that you did something, it remembers how hard it was, and it rewards you more for it. This is why disciplined behaviors, even when difficult at first, can become incredibly satisfying over time. The brain starts to associate difficulty with progress. That 60-second action, no matter how simple, is training your mind to value effort. Each time you show up, even when it's inconvenient, you're reinforcing the identity of someone who follows through. And that reinforcement becomes embedded deep within the motivation circuits of your brain. There's also an important neurochemical interplay between dopamine and other neurotransmitters like norepinephrine and serotonin, which regulate alertness and mood. When you begin your day with an intentional, focused habit, you're shaping the internal environment of your brain for the next several hours. That small act creates a cascade effect, adjusting your levels of focus, energy, and emotional stability. This biological shift can make all the difference between a scattered, distracted day and one filled with clarity and drive. The 60-second habit is not isolated. It is the spark that ignites a chain reaction throughout your neurology, priming your system for higher performance and discipline across all areas. Even on a psychological level, engaging in a consistent habit builds self-trust. Each time you complete the habit, you're reinforcing the idea that you keep your promises to yourself. That kind of internal congruence is rare in a world filled with distraction and inconsistency. But it's incredibly powerful when your brain begins to view you as someone who does what they say they'll do. Your confidence grows, your decision-making sharpens, and your reliance on external motivation decreases. You no longer need to feel inspired to act. You act because it's who you've become. Ultimately, building discipline through a 60-second habit isn't about the task itself. It's about what it activates in your brain. It's about the shift from waiting to act to acting and then feeling the reward. It's about changing your relationship with effort and training your mind to crave what strengthens you. When practiced daily, this habit becomes more than a routine. It becomes a neurological anchor, one that realigns your motivation pathways toward long-term purpose, not short-term pleasure. Over time, that rewiring builds a level of discipline that feels natural, effortless, and deeply ingrained. And it all starts with 1 minute of focus and consistency each day. Science shows that daily repetition of a behavior is one of the most effective ways to strengthen mental resilience and improve decision-making control. The brain is designed to change in response to what it does repeatedly, a concept known as experience-dependent plasticity. This means that the more frequently you perform an intentional act of discipline, even if it only takes 60 seconds, the more your brain wires itself around that act. You begin to form neural circuits that favor thoughtful decision making over impulsive reaction. Over time, this repetition solidifies a pattern of behavior that no longer requires as much conscious effort. It becomes your automatic response to challenges, distractions, or temptations. The brain thrives on pattern and consistency. When a particular circuit is activated daily, the synaptic connections between neurons grow stronger and more efficient. This is how behaviors become second nature. Discipline then becomes less about trying and more about training. Every day you perform that habit, you're reinforcing a neural identity, someone who shows up, someone who follows through. Mental resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you build by repeatedly choosing to engage the executive functions of your brain, especially in moments when it's easier not to. Repetition teaches your brain how to operate under pressure. It increases your capacity to maintain calm and clarity in the face of stress. Each time you push through discomfort, even in a small way, your brain becomes better at doing it again in the future. And when this is done daily, the cumulative effect is enormous. A 60-second habit becomes a kind of psychological gym session. Just like your muscles get stronger with regular workouts, your mental endurance increases with daily discipline. And this resilience doesn't just help you stay on track with your goals. It spills over into your relationships, your emotional regulation, and your ability to adapt in challenging environments. Decision-making control is directly linked to how well your brain can balance short-term impulses with long-term rewards. This balance is heavily influenced by the strength of your prefrontal cortex, which governs executive functions. Daily repetition of an intentional habit strengthens this region and improves its ability to regulate the more primal parts of your brain. Over time, your prefrontal cortex learns to step in faster and more effectively. That's what gives you the power to pause before reacting, to choose wisely rather than impulsively. It's what allows you to follow your values instead of your urges. And it's not a matter of willpower. It's a matter of training. Just like a pilot gets better at flying through turbulence with experience, your brain gets better at navigating complexity and temptation the more often it practices. Another layer to this repetition is the role of neurochemical reinforcement. When a behavior is repeated consistently, the brain starts to associate it with predictability and safety. That association reduces stress and increases confidence. Your nervous system begins to calm at the moment of routine. This creates a positive feedback loop. The behavior no longer feels like an effortful task. It becomes something your brain looks forward to because it's associated with stability, control, and progress. This shift makes it easier to remain disciplined because you've neurologically connected the act of discipline with a sense of internal order. And that order is deeply rewarding. Even when life becomes unpredictable or chaotic, a daily habit acts as an anchor. It's something you can rely on, something that grounds you. That consistency teaches your brain that you are capable of creating structure even when the world around you is unstable. This builds psychological safety, which is the foundation of high-level mental performance. When your brain knows it can count on at least one daily act of control, it becomes more capable of handling uncertainty everywhere else. This is why the habit doesn't have to be long or complicated. It just has to be done with intention and done daily. That's what rewires the brain for discipline. The effect of daily repetition also enhances your internal narrative. Each time you perform the habit, you're telling yourself something powerful. I can do hard things. I can stay consistent. I am someone who leads myself. That internal story begins to shift your identity. And identity is the ultimate driver of behavior. People tend to act in alignment with who they believe they are. So, when repetition creates the belief that you are disciplined, you start making decisions from that place. It becomes natural to choose what aligns with long-term goals, not because you're forcing it, but because it feels like you. This level of control doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen predictably. The science is clear. What you do consistently, even in small doses, rewires your brain to make those actions easier, more automatic, and more effective over time. Discipline, mental strength, and sharp decision-making aren't mysterious traits. They are the result of intentional repetition. And a 60-second habit, when practiced daily, has the power to create exactly that.